Welcome to Going Off-World, your gateway to the cosmos beyond our Earth. Join us as we embark on this journey together to the Moon, Mars, Venus, and beyond.
Welcome to episode 1 of Going Off-World. I'm your host, Steve Fisher. This show has been a long time coming, and it's near and dear to my heart. If you're coming to check things out, then welcome. Those who know me, they know I'm a space junkie, and I aspire to do great things to help humanity reach for the stars. This show is a way for me to connect with amazing people doing amazing things to push us forward. The show is going to evolve, but right now, we have some great conversations in queue. And today, for our inaugural episode, we're exploring humanity's future beyond Earth with two visionaries who are working to establish human settlements in the atmosphere of Venus. That's right, Venus. Guillermo Sohnlein, founder of the Waypaver Foundation, and Mahandan from the Humans to Venus Foundation, share their fascinating perspectives on making humanity a truly multiplanetary species. From discussing the challenges of building floating cities in Venus's atmosphere to exploring how space development can improve life on Earth, they offer unique insights into the future of human space exploration. As leaders of organizations working to expand humanity's presence in space, they explain why Venus might be a more viable destination for human settlement than many realize. Whether you're curious about the next frontier of space exploration, or how we'll establish permanent settlements beyond Earth, or what technological breakthroughs will transform our future in space, you will not want to miss this conversation. Join us on the journey, where the sky's not the limit and the stars are just the beginning. Welcome, Guillermo, Ro. Let's start with each of you a bit about yourself. Guillermo, why don't you start?
You want me to go first? All right. So let's see. Long story short, I've basically spent 25 years doing a bunch of different startups, starting with a tech startup in Silicon Valley during the height of the internet boom. And that basically launched me into this kind of series of adventures with different startups. I've probably done over a dozen for-profit and nonprofit organizations. And at least 4, 5, 6 of them have been space related, since that's one of my passion areas. And we can talk more about those in detail as we go through. Just one thing that I usually note for people, just as far as my background, because I do so much in the space world, I do this even though I'm not a scientist or an engineer by background. I studied economics in college, and then I went on to law school. So that's my background.
Okay. Ro, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, my background, again, isn't from space originally. So I started off with a degree in biochemistry, and then went on to study. Well, I didn't really know what I wanted to do in my life, as I'm sure many people who are listening to this have the same kind of issue. And, I went down the path of management consulting, which is a straight path to what I studied at university. So went down that path, started to enjoy it. I mean, it was more of a generalist path as opposed to something that's more targeted. So I thought that was the best path for me to try to figure out what to do. But it never really satisfied that gap in my heart for space, which has been there since I was a kid. So eventually realized, I wanted to kind of get involved in the space sector, but management consulting wasn't really doing that for me. So I thought, let me just network with people on LinkedIn, and eventually came across Guillermo and the Humans to Venus initiative. And, fast forward a couple more months and we are where we are.
So Guillermo, what about you? How did you start your journey? I know you've talked about your background, but what really was it when you were a kid? Was it what kind of, how'd you get it, and how'd you get involved? I mean, really?
Yeah, for me, it was similar to Ro. It was a childhood thing. I have very distinct memories of when I was 11 years old, having a recurring dream of being the commander of the first Martian colony. Unlike Ro, I grew up in the United States, where we had plenty of opportunities to become astronauts, but they all went through NASA. And again, since I wasn't a scientist or an engineer, the best path for me was always going to be as a pilot, and to become a commander in the old NASA. Now it's changed a bit, but back in when I was coming through, to become a commander of a mission, you had to be a pilot, and you kind of work backwards from that. You had to be a test pilot, and to be a test pilot, you had to be a fighter pilot in the military. And unfortunately, when I was 19, my eyesight went bad, and at the time, having perfect 20/20 vision was a prerequisite. So my entire astronaut career went up in flames when I was 19, and my eyesight went bad. So that kind of threw me for a loop, and I ended up meandering for a while. And it wasn't until 2002, a year after we sold my first company, that I really started looking at space again, and this time coming in as an entrepreneur instead of coming in as an astronaut.
I can relate to that. I'm a pilot, and I took the same. You're right. It went from commander to test pilot to fighter pilot, and usually Air Force Academy, because you're flying the best stuff, and you have the top seat. And I didn't get my nomination, but it's that journey. It's changed a bit. Hopefully, it's going to change even more the next 20 years, which basically leads to the next question for both of you. I'll kind of continue with you, Guillermo, and go to you, Ro. Like, what excites you most about the future of space exploration?
Well, just real quick, you said the Air Force Academy. For me, I wanted to be a Marine Corps fighter pilot. So I had to go through the Naval Academy, and I did get an appointment to the Naval Academy. But interesting tidbit, here, I'm just going to digress a little bit, but because most people don't know this story about me. I got an appointment to the Naval Academy, and because of that, I declined all my other college admissions that I was given. And then a month before I was supposed to report to the Naval Academy, someone over there realized suddenly that I wasn't an American citizen because I was born in Argentina. And so they called me up and said, "Hey, there's a problem here. It says you're not an American citizen." And I said, "Well, yeah, you guys knew that." "No, we didn't. You have to be an American for the academies. You have to be an American citizen before you go in." So as you know from your own efforts, to get an appointment to an academy, you have to get an endorsement from one of your congressional leaders. So I had an appointment from both of California senators and a U.S. Representative, and somehow my application made it through all three of them without anybody noticing that I wasn't an American citizen. So anyway, I ended up losing my appointment to the Naval Academy because I wasn't a citizen. I became a naturalized citizen a year later, but by then it was too late. Anyway, quick little story that most people don't know about me. So what excites me the most about space? Do you mean today, or looking forward, or ever, that I've always been excited?
No, I would say let's look at the horizon of like 20 years and in 25 years. Do you know, it kind of relates to the mission for humans to Venus and the colony on Venus, like a human settlement, on Venus is that vision, and we'll come to. But White Paper has a broader, mission itself. But I think, what excites you the most over these next 20, 25 years?
Well, I think what excites me the most is, I think I've said this a few times, but let me broaden it out a little bit. I think one thing that excites me the most is finally over the last 20 years, we've gone through this transition of space being going from being the exclusive purview of just a handful of national programs to basically a global public-private space ecosystem. So I think there are a lot more opportunities available today and over the next 20 years to go into space than there were even when I was coming up. Number one. Number two, it's very global. Just a couple hours ago, a friend of mine's at a conference in Japan and sent me slides from the presentation from JAXA that they're planning a lunar base by the year 2040. Likewise, I was just looking at a presentation that China just an updated presentation on China and Russia's plans for the International Lunar Research Station. So there's just a lot of different opportunities for people to go into space and for humanity to expand beyond planet Earth. So I think in general, the next 20 years are going to be an exciting time to see how all this plays out.
Leroy, what about you?
Yeah, I think Guillermo touched on the main point, which is that space is going to become a lot more accessible to everybody else, and especially the general public, right? So I think that's a great thing, and it's going to be a very much a collaborative effort as well. So globally, like Guillermo said, countries are coming together. There's going to be, all of the work we need to do to get humans into space and beyond is going to take all of that collaboration from across the world, right? So that's really exciting. And space, in my opinion, really is a global frontier as opposed to the final frontier. So yeah, that's really exciting. And, I think in terms of my personal perspective, I think understanding where we come from in terms of humanity, as a species, in terms of the physics of, how we came about into existence, where we're going to go, where we can go, our understanding of physics, all of this stuff has unanswered questions. And I think going out into space and carrying out research will help us to better understand where we fit into the universe. And that prospect for me is really interesting. And, is very motivating as well and inspiring to just, be a cog in a machine that's working towards that purpose, which is a lot greater than us.
Well, as you've worked on the Humans to Venus initiative and the foundation, tell me about the challenges you're seeing facing the space industry, not just for Venus in particular, but just as you've gotten to, you're kind of the newer perspective. Well, I'll kind of jump to Guillermo to kind of get a more, the longer seasoned perspective. It'd be interesting to see if there's a common ground or, what do you think are the challenges?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for me with space, from my perspective coming in, the first one would have been, it doesn't seem very accessible. So I think the marketing side of space and the space sector really isn't where it should be in terms of capturing the public imagination. And I think with things like human space exploration, you really do need to capture the public's imagination in order to drive that forward. Because at the moment, we don't really have that because we haven't been to, beyond low Earth orbit since, I don't know, the 1970s or whatever. So I think to try and emulate, what Kennedy did in the 1960s with the moon target being that, it really just brought the whole world together. And I think at the moment it's very siloed. I think people are working in siloed sectors within space. There's not really much visibility over what's going on outside of their own silos. So trying to break down those barriers and bring people together and really capture the global public's imagination again is going to be the biggest problem and the biggest thing to tackle. And that, applies to Venus as well, right? It's more of a marketing campaign and a publicity campaign and getting people to know about what's out there, what we understand, what there is to look forward to. That's the biggest issue, I think, at the moment to deal with.
Guillermo, what about you?
I don't know if I'm going to give a bigger, longer term perspective, but I'll tell you that if I had to pick one challenge going forward, it's the same one of the same ones that I've seen over the last 20 years, which is access to talent. I think one of the problems, one of the byproducts of what Ro was just talking about not doing a great job of kind of promoting space and making space seem accessible to people, is that a lot of people whose careers were not as aerospace engineers or as pilots / astronauts have a personal interest in space, would love to work professionally in the space community, and yet they don't feel it's accessible to them. They don't feel that they can add value. They don't feel like they could get an opportunity to work in that space. And the problem is that those are precisely the kind of people that add the most value into everything that we're doing. So we need more people from finance, from marketing, from sales, from a lot of these arenas that would approach a lot of these problems with a fresh perspective. And we're going to need a lot more people. So, for example, I was just in India last week speaking at a space conference, and I was shocked that probably 5 or 6 people came up to me and said that their greatest challenge for whether it's a space startup or any other sort of space initiative was access to talent. And it shocked me because India's got over 1 billion people. They've got decades of success as a spacefaring nation. How could they possibly have a problem with talent. And what they were telling me is that the bulk of that talent is within Israel, within the National Space Program. And so there isn't a big pipeline of either junior or middle management, mid-career kind of people in China, in India, that feel that they can add value within the space world, and there are people outside of the space community that don't feel that they can add value coming in. So I think that's one of the problems that we're going to have to fix globally over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Sounds like an opportunity. Problem and an opportunity.
Yes.
So I mean, it
Yes,
sounds,
definitely.
Creating that pipeline. Yeah, I share those experiences, personally. But what do you think is a promising opportunity in the industry, based on some of the challenges, how to solve it?
I think pretty much what Guillermo said in terms of getting people from other industries, other fields, things that we see in common industries at the moment within work, getting those into the space sector. I think space is pretty much a sector that amalgamates all of the other sectors we have, but it just pushes it out to a far greater cause. So having all of those, sales, marketing, people who work in finance, all of those things will be needed within space as well. And I think getting those people in there, getting the word out there that people can be involved in the space sector. And like Guillermo said, many people have an interest in space, and they have done since a young age, but it's just not been something they've been made aware of that they can contribute to. And given their career paths, they may have pursued something for years and years on end, and they think, that's my life done, right? So getting that message out there really is important, I think. And getting people involved and letting them know that they can really add value to the sector from their different diverse backgrounds is really important, I think.
So this leads to, looking, we've kind of kept on this 10, 20-year lens, 25-year lens. What do you see the impact? Because the individuals working in the industry itself and the people that are passionate about space, how do you see this impacting life on Earth? How does it impact the everyday life for people? What do you like the advancements? What does it do? Do you put your futurist hat on a bit? Like, what do you think it does for humanity, for just the population at large?
So just to clarify then, the question you're asking me is, are you saying what will space give back to the general public or to the people? Or are you saying what will the people who get involved from outside the space give back to the entire cause type thing?
When you think of commercialization of space is a business, right? And when you think about innovations here on Earth, drones, self-driving cars, there's an impact or benefit. What do you think that could be? One thing, many things, because there's people have to care. There's going to want to be investment in it. There's going to want to be interest in it. What do you think that might be?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few key issues. I mean, I think the big one at the moment is sustainability. So, technology is specifically around sustainability. So, for example, Starship, using that reusable rocket technology is really important, and actually expanding that outwards is going to be important for space exploration. I think being considerate of those things is going to be important when we talk about, replicating space missions on a more regular cadence as well, to, reduce pollution, all of those things, and make sure we're not, financially exhausting resources. And I think in terms of technology as well, like artificial intelligence is something we see all too often right now, but it's something that's been developing at an exponential rate. So considering where it could be in the next 5 to 10 years, I think, potentially we could see that guiding spacecraft, for example, which could be a really great thing, obviously hoping it's not going to be like a Skynet scenario like in Terminator, but it's something that could be really good to see in the future. And I think that's something that would be beneficial as well.
Yeah, I would say Skynet's probably a cautionary case study. Potential future. But where I go with that is I think of what the Apollo program gave us. So it gave us microwave ovens. It gave us Velcro. It gave us Tang. It gave us a lot of innovations that ripple through society. That's what I was kind of getting into that. Like there are people that may never touch space to go to space that it could benefit, and even cancer research. There could be orbital labs for pharmaceutical companies, right? It's just there's a lot. So, Guillermo, may I ask you if you come back? What do you think?
Well, let me try answering it from a different perspective, because I kind of took issue with the way you phrased the question, because you started with what benefit the space industry is going to give the general public. And I, as you know, because we've known each other a long time, I really have never liked the term space industry, because space is not an industry. Space is a geographic location. So one way of looking at this is this question of what benefit we get is, don't look at space like an industry. Look at it like a geographic location where other industries play, right? Or where other industries operate. And then you start seeing the benefits that you can get by going through the different industries. So whether it's a transportation services or manufacturing, or as Ro pointed out, pharmaceutical companies, or, agriculture, right? Commercial agriculture is leveraging GPS and Earth observation data, right? So now you're going to get better, more efficient, more effective agriculture because of space assets, right? If you got rid of the space assets, then we'd be knocking agriculture back a bit. So I think that's another way of looking at that question, is just seeing how other industries benefit from having space as part of their strategic plan.
Would you draw parallels to like the age of exploration when it came like looking at the Americas? Because as a place, it created new opportunities, people think Ireland had the potato. It was the Andes. Like we took the potato from South America. It's like most people don't know that, right? Or tobacco, right? Those things that created whole new markets and whole new entrepreneurial classes of people, right? So
it's
a fair assessment. I appreciate the realignment in that, the perspective. It's good.
Well, you don't even have to get that specific. You can go much more general. Like, for example, the tourism industry, right? So you had tourism of people going from point A to point B and visiting different places, let's say, within their geographic area, wherever they are. Well, then we have the age of boats, and now people are using going out and being on the water, whether it's like cruise ships or sailing or whatever it is, right? And then we had the age of airplanes, and now you got people taking trips by flying to different places. So it's still the tourism industry, but it's benefiting from these different locations with where they operate. Anyway.
No, it's great. It's great. Ro, you want to add anything? Kind of come back to that? You want to add anything to it?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think I understand the question better now that you've explained it. Guillermo's kind of gone through that now. So, what Guillermo said was great, because I mean, it's in terms of the strategic plan of other industries, space really is just an expansion of what they're already doing. So, if they incorporate that into their vision, then that would in turn increase, or it would alter what they're trying to create and their internal, operations. So, I think that would generate in itself, it would benefit a load of industries just by incorporating space into their plans, like Guillermo said. I think, like pharmaceuticals is a great one. Additive technologies, for example, like 3D printing, that's going to have some great uses in space, but then also in, for example, biology, chemistry, in the medical setting, 3D printing organs and medical body parts and things like that. That's going to be something that could potentially be of great value in the future for us, and in terms of scientific research, in terms of in the clinical setting. So there are a lot of things that we can just extrapolate from space and say that it could benefit humanity. But I think it's going to be one of the things where we have to go through it, and then from everyone knowing about space, they can then, align on what their path will be in terms of their company and their organizations and their products.
That's great. And what I'd love to do is take the conversation from the broader space area, the geographic location of space, and kind of talk about the Waypaver Foundation as its broader mission, and then kind of narrow down and talk about humans to Venus. So Guillermo, can you tell us about the mission and the vision for Waypaver, which is our underwriter for this podcast? So I'd love the audience to learn more about it and its history and journey.
Yeah, I mean, at its core, Waypaver is essentially a grant-making organization focused on kind of twin objectives. One is to help make humanity a multi-planet species, and the other is to help improve life here on Earth, which is a nice segue from your last question about the benefits of space for Earth. So essentially, we don't currently have any of our own programs. What we do is we give grants to other nonprofit organizations that are operating in those two spheres, either helping to make humanity a multi-planet species, which is how the relationship between Waypaver and Humans to Venus Foundation, where Humans to Venus Foundation is one of our grantee organizations. And then organizations also helping to improve life here on Earth. And basically for that, we use as our guidelines the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 SDGs.
Well, I know that it existed before you. So how did you kind of get involved? How did you kind of take things over? It's had its interesting kind of starts and stops.
Yeah, so the organization was founded in 2015 and with the same general vision, right, to help make humanity a multi-planet species. And over a period of, 5 years or so, it kind of meandered a little bit, trying to figure out exactly how it was going to distinguish itself. The group decided very early on to focus on lunar, since that seemed to be the nearest term opportunity. So Waypaver was really focusing on helping to get humanity to the moon on a permanent basis. And that was the direction it was going. I became involved, I think, like a year after it started, like in 2016. I was an advisor, then I joined the board of directors, and then I was chair of the board. But about 3 years ago, I think it started kind of faltering, trying to figure out exactly where to go, because the current events kind of caught up to it. Because now all of a sudden Artemis was taking off and things were going with the moon. And so it was trying to figure out where to go next, because it seemed too early to look at Mars. So about 2 years ago, the CEO was effectively going to shut it down, but I told him before he shut it down, why didn't he just give it to me, and I'll see if I can figure out a path forward for it. So really over the last year is when we started honing in on this idea of kind of becoming a grant-making organization to other nonprofits, both on the multi-planet species side and then also on improving life here on Earth.
So what initiatives do you have on the list for this year? Like what's the current mission plan?
Well, so the biggest near-term objective is part of what also distinguishes the Waypaver 2.0, as we're calling it. We're also going to do something a little bit innovative, rather than doing what most nonprofit organizations do, which is continually raise money and then give out grants. We're looking to build an endowment right from the beginning, and the way we're going to do that and kind of grow it and manage it ourselves is to make a big part of the endowment be a space venture studio, which you know about because we've talked about it. We really want to create a space venture studio where we are helping to create new ventures, for-profit ventures that are providing the pieces for humanity's roadmap to become a multi-planet species. So in doing that, we kind of both fulfill our ultimate vision of helping humanity become a multi-planet species, while also hopefully deriving an ROI from the portfolio that will help grow the endowment, which will then allow us to make grants to some of these nonprofits.
That kind of dovetails into my question of how you measure impact and success. Is there anything above and beyond the venture studio you would qualify as, say, 5 years now? How has the foundation been successful?
I think one general corporate measure of success is, can we get this to be self-sustaining? right? Be an evergreen grant making organization, because the worst thing you can do is have to raise money every year to be able to give out grants. So hopefully within the next 5 to 7 years, we can get this thing to be completely self-sustaining. So I think that's probably the ultimate goal, because once you do that, then it's just a matter of growing it from there. Initially, what we're going to focus on is giving, let's call them micro grants, anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 to these different grantee organizations, and in that way, hope to help make an impact within those organizations.
So where does education and outreach play into this?
Right now, we don't know if we're going to be doing our own programs. I think we're going to probably, for the foreseeable future, stay as a grant-making organization, which means that the education and outreach is what's done by the grantee organizations. So, for example, Humans to Venus Foundation being one of our grantee organizations, that is one of Humans to Venus Foundation's primary missions, is to do education and outreach. So we'll kind of do it through the grantee organizations.
That's an excellent segue to Humans to Venus. So Ro,
you're welcome.
Thank you, Ro. Thank you very much. I know you kind of sparked it with Guillermo, but since Ro's the ED here, like, pitch me, bro. Like, so what inspired the creation of this, and what's the goals and objectives? So,
yeah, I mean, so in terms of the creation, I think Guillermo's probably better prone to answer that one, because he's the one who created it, right? But I think if I speak on his behalf, Guillermo, you can interrupt me if I'm saying anything that's not in accordance with you. But I think Guillermo kind of realized, with this perseverance of the pursuit of Mars and the moon, people have neglected Venus in terms of its traits and its proximity to Earth as well. And I think there are a lot of scientists out there who are working under space agencies who don't have the funding to, particularly work on Venus in more detail as opposed to Mars and the moon. But they do believe that it's a feasible target for humans to strive for in terms of establishing a presence there. So there are traits of Venus that are similar to Earth in terms of gravity. The gravity there is roughly 0.9 Gs. Atmospheric pressure, temperature in the Venusian atmosphere, specifically 50 to 60 kilometers above the Venusian surface, is a bit of a Goldilocks region in terms of we can survive there if we have the technologies and we implement what we have at the moment to establish a presence there. So there is scientific grounding behind Venus. So I think Guillermo then launched the Humans to Venus initiative to explore that in more detail, to flesh out and see if it was indeed a feasible idea, and if it was, then to insert that into the global narrative of Moon, Mars, Venus, and beyond in terms of the human spaceflight programs. So that's more of a beginning of where it came from, but I'm sure Guillermo can go into that in more detail after this. But in terms of the goals and objectives of the Humans to Venus Foundation at the moment, so I'd say that the biggest vision for us at the moment is to probably create the largest global community of Venus-focused professionals and enthusiasts to support with inserting Venus into the global narrative of human space exploration, in particular to add it as a worthy target of consideration for establishing a human presence off Earth alongside Moon and Mars. And the way we do this really is through three constituent parts of the foundation. So the first of that is public outreach. Like we've touched on before, public outreach is so important. So conferences, speaking at conferences, guest speaker conference gigs and things like that. Our monthly newsletter, which we release with human spaceflight updates, our blog, for example. That's all important in terms of driving that public outreach side of things. The second is private community. So our private community is our global community, who we kind of amalgamated from whoever's interested in Venus, who we come across. And that pretty much constitutes of our Venus Speaker Series, which is a monthly speaker event where we get guest speakers who are within the Venus field or within human space exploration related topics. And we get them to come on and give a bit of an informal discussion about their topic area. And we have a bit more of an informal debate amongst our community every month. So that's a way of engaging the community. We also have a Venus Summit events, which we do twice every year, one in the US and one in Europe. And again, that's more of a chance for us to get our community together in person to then discuss those same topics or come together and put our minds to solve a particular problem. So, for example, in the most recent one, we're trying to flesh out a Venus roadmap, which essentially covers the logistical, technological needs to what it would look like to go to Venus over the next 30 years, for example. How would we do that? What are the steps that need to be in place? And that's just so we can get people who have the resources, who have the motivation to do that, to then fit themselves into that plan and then make that stuff happen. So we're just setting the groundwork for that to happen and making people aware that it is possible to do. And then the third and the final one, I guess it's 3/4, is science and education. So that's more of our partnerships with universities and schools, inserting Venus into the curriculums, across generations, and just making sure that people are aware of Venus as a potential target.
Guillermo, you have anything to add to that?
Just jumping off of the last thing that Rose said there. One of the let's call them aspirational goals that we kind of set for the organization is to have 1,000 people living and working in the Venusian atmosphere by the year 2050. Now that's just kind of a point in time, where, as he was talking about, the roadmap will kind of talk about the entire gamut for decades. But if you think about that, if you think about 1,000 people living and working in the Venusian atmosphere by the year 2050, which, by the way, is just a riff off of Elon's founding mission for SpaceX, which is to have 1 million people living and working on the Martian surface by the year 2050. If you think about both of those goals, whether it's our goal or Elon's goal, a lot of the people that are going to be doing that either haven't been born yet or are in grade school right now. And yet a lot of the people that it's going to take to make that possible for them are currently either in university or they're just getting out, and they're more like at the beginning of their careers. And so from our standpoint, we have to kind of take a broad view of when we say education programs. It's everything going all the way down to grade school, all the way up to professional development for either early stage or early career or mid-career professionals. And we realized very early on, there's no way one organization could do all of that. And so instead, as Ro pointed out, we do this through partnerships with other organizations that are focused in different areas within that spectrum. And then we just focus on the Venus part.
So let's talk about why. Why would people even go? What are the benefits of exploring and creating this human settlement? Like, what does this do for humanity writ large beyond the multi-planet species need that we all agree? But I think just the creating a level of fault tolerance with the human race. Why? You want to take that first, and then maybe Ro.
Yeah, I can
Guillermo.
just dip into that. So, I mean, I think humanity is naturally a curious species. So I think we naturally have a quest for answers, right? And it comes down to, why go into space at all? Why go to Mars? Why go to the moon? Why go beyond there? And I think really with these kind of pursuits, because they're so out there, it's something, because, to understand where we come from, to understand, how to better our lives here on Earth, I think space offers a lot of answers. And I think going to Venus, for example, establishing our presence in the Venusian atmosphere in floating infrastructure as possible, that would in turn have technological advancements that we can apply to Earth. We can use Venus, for example, to test technologies. For example, maybe drones to go down to the surface under the high pressure environments, things that would not otherwise be done on Earth if we didn't explore outwards. And these foreign environments, I think, and unfamiliar situations really help us to develop in those areas. So I think going to Venus and beyond establishing a multi-planet species, for example, all of the other aspects of technology, of knowledge, of science, all of that will progress, and that will benefit humanity in inadvertently, basically, I think. And I think that's pretty much the main reason for why. Probably why not is a better question, as we say on our website.
Okay, so Guillermo, why? And maybe why not, but why? Why would you...
It's funny. A few years ago, a friend of mine, Will Pomerantz, gave a TED Talk on why go into space generally, right? The way you frame the question. And And I loved his answer because he said, look, the problem with trying to answer that question of why is that every single person that you ask would have a different why. So it's kind of pointless to ask it. So, like, for example, in this context, let's say it's a national government that wants to go to Venus. Every different government will have a different why for why they want to go. And yet all of the national governments are going to have collectively different whys than a private company that wants to go. And every individual is going to have a different answer than every company. So it's tough to answer the question of why, especially for the question you don't want us to answer, which is, the multi-planet species, the broader one, the more philosophical one, more long-term one. For Venus in particular, so the part that I think Ro didn't emphasize as much as he usually does when he was answering earlier is of all the different environmental issues on environmental risks that we face when we go into space. The one that we can't control is gravity. And he did mention that Venus has similar gravity to Earth. But the reason that's important is because if we are going to become a multi-planet species, it means we're going to have to reproduce wherever it is that we're going. And as of today, we don't know if humans or Homo sapiens can reproduce in less than 1 G of gravity. So anyone who's kind of taking us to Mars, we could all be going to Mars and die out within a generation because we just can't reproduce there. So that's the main advantage from a human spaceflight standpoint. Well, from a long-term human spaceflight standpoint, why Venus would be of interest to folks.
What kind of technological innovations are still needed? It's like suits, systems, like what is needed to successfully create the settlement? Like what do we still have ahead of us to figure out?
So first of all, Ro mentioned this roadmap that we're helping to put together, our community's helping to put together. That one we're going to launch in October. It'll be a website, kind of like a wiki kind of thing where everyone can contribute to it. That is going to be the basis for answering a lot of the question that you just asked. So there's, just like with anything else, especially with an exploration effort, there are things that we know we need, and then there's going to be a bunch of stuff that we don't know today that we were going to need is going to come up as we start going down this path. So we're kind of creating this roadmap as a depository of all this kind of information that we can share with each other globally as we go forward. That being said, the general categories of things that we know today that we're going to need. Number one, well, obviously, we need to know more about Venus. We need to send more science missions to Venus because we know much more about Mars and Moon than we know about Venus. So we need more scientific data, especially about the atmosphere. Number two, which is going to be the same for Mars, is we need to figure out how to do interplanetary travel, human spaceflight. To date, no human has ever flown beyond the relative safety of the Earth-Moon system. So once you go beyond that, you're exposed to all sorts of solar radiation and all sorts of other things. And we have no idea really how to best do an interplanetary flight. We're going to need to know that for Mars. We're going to need to know that for Venus. We're going to need to know that for wherever else we're going. Then specific to Venus, there are 4 general categories of things we're going to need to figure out. One is how to do atmospheric operations. Everything that everyone's been doing for Leo, Moon, Mars, and beyond involves landing on hard surface, whereas we're going to have to drop into the atmosphere, dock with something that's floating in the atmosphere, and then at some point take off from that floating platform and get back to orbit. Those are capabilities that we've played with. Humanity's kind of tested a bit, but we're nowhere near perfecting that, and certainly not doing that in Venus. And then the other 3 categories are more chemistry kind of stuff. One is converting the CO2 atmosphere into breathable air. The other is extracting drinking water out of the sulfuric acid clouds. And related to that, number 3 is developing habitats out of materials that are resistant to sulfuric acid. The prime 2 that we use here on Earth is glass and Teflon. That's the brand name. I don't remember the chemical name for that, but those are basically the big 6 categories of things that we're going to need to figure out.
So easy things. Simple.
Well, hold on. It's not necessarily simple. You're right.
No, that was sarcasm. If anyone didn't understand.
No. But no, I agree with you. But here's the thing: none of that requires huge innovation, right? Like even going to the moon, going and landing on the moon. The number one, remember that Waypaver started focusing on lunar settlement, right? So when Waypaver was looking at this early on, the single biggest challenge that we had and continue to have, if you're watching the Starship tests, is we don't have a landing system. We have no way of landing humans on the moon. We had it back in Apollo, and then we lost it. So humanity today, no one has a system for landing people on the moon. And that is the single biggest roadblock for getting humans onto the surface of the moon. So that's a huge innovation that needs to happen. Whereas everything I just described for Venus are things that we currently know how to do. We have it. We have rebreathers. Scuba divers have been using rebreathers. We know how to convert CO2 into breathable air. We know how to extract drinking water, sulfuric acid. We know all these things. We just have to figure out how to do them on Venus and how to scale them up to support a floating community there.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think Guillermo's covered that in a lot of detail, to be honest. He's covered all the key things there. And like I said before, I think it's more of a case of all of those technologies that we do to kind of reach Venus and to establish a presence there, they will have benefits and repercussions down on Earth as well. And those are going to be important.
So what is
actually...
Go ahead,
Sorry,
Guillermo.
can I jump in on that? Because it just reminded me of going all the way back to when you asked earlier about benefits of space for Earth. And Steve, I think you mentioned as you were engaging with Ro about, from Apollo, we had, I don't know, Tang, Velcro, or whatever it is, that we say that we got from it. But here's the thing. Before we did Apollo, we did not know that we were going to have those things, right? So before you do you embark on this kind of journey, you have no idea what you're going to discover. You have no idea what you're going to develop, or no idea what you're going to innovate. And it's going to be the same thing for going to Venus. We have no idea what we're going to develop that's going to benefit humanity here on Earth. The one thing that I will say that's unique about Venus versus, let's say, Mars or the Moon, as far as benefits to Earth, is that's the place that has an atmosphere, just like Earth. That's the place that has runaway greenhouse effect, just like Earth. So I'm guessing, I'm just kind of prognosticating and estimating that in order to safely put humans in the Venusian atmosphere, we're going to come up with a lot of technologies and medical breakthroughs to deal with that atmosphere that are going to help us here on Earth. I have no idea what they are. But I'm guessing that we're going to derive more benefit from Venus on that front than we will from, let's say, the Moon or Mars.
I've often wondered if in the next 20 years, the work we do to help people deal with solar radiation and long-term space travel actually does things to, I don't want to say cure cancer, or how about the treatments to deal with, because it would, just like radiation sickness, it would create, how do you prevent that? Well, you could affect the cell, right, at a cellular level. I've often thought about that. Yeah,
that's great. That's a great point. Yeah.
Rhoda, Joe, anything you wanted to add?
No. I think that's covered in detail, to be honest. Nothing from my side to add on top of that.
Yeah, as we kind of get toward the, toward our podcast close, I wanted to, we talked about the long journey in this and but right now, what is the most exciting technological advancement in the industry? Right over things you're seeing, trends. What do you think? What is really exciting you that's going to maybe be a bit of a game changer? And that could be anything. I'll go with Ro first. I'll go with you first. So
sorry to interrupt you there. I think it's a pretty straightforward question and an answer. I think the answer is reusable rockets. Sorry, and specifically Starship, right? So Starship, we're seeing them now with their launches. Starship's had their fourth flight test. And honestly, everything, once that Starship is up and running, that's going to be our means of going to Venus, to the moon, to Mars, and beyond. So I think companies at the moment are really underestimating how much of an impact, how much of a paradigm shift Starship will have on the space sector. And I think once it's up and running, it'll be a complete inflection point. And having that reusable technology in itself is going to be really, really beneficial in terms of sustainability and sustainable space exploration. But also in terms of making space a lot more accessible, a lot more cost-effective, cheaper to access space, and send higher payloads up into space as well. So that's going to be, for me, Starship and reusable tech is going to be the most near-term benefit we'll see in terms of really, causing an inflection point in space.
Guillermo, how about you?
So I'll just add one more thing on the Starship, because that's a +1 for me. That's what I always say is probably the most fundamental shift in the next 5-10 years is going to be Starship. But I always like to add a little detail to this, which is so huge that even people in the space industry. Oh, see, now you got me saying space industry.
Yes, that's right. Blame your host. That's okay. Yeah. I understand.
Exactly. No, but I think even people that work in space forget is the scale of what Starship is, right? So Starship is being tested now, and people are kind of watching these tests. And a lot of this is under contract with NASA for the Artemis 3 mission, right, as part of the human landing system. So they're trying to land on the moon. And then people from outside space are always like, well, we did that 50 years ago. We knew how to do that, right? It's like, because we sent the Apollo missions there. Yeah, but Apollo, this is a sense of scale. Apollo is like a minivan, right? Starship is like a 20-story building. I think people forget that. And that's why it's such a huge shift. That's why so many people answer that question the same way. It's like Starship. You're going from a minivan that can carry 2, maybe 3 people to, Crew Dragon today carries 4. Maybe it's designed for 7, right? But usually takes 4. To something that can carry 100 people. Like it's a massive difference. Okay, so now I'm going to answer your question, adding on to what Rose said. Up until about a year ago, I would answer that question the same way, Starship. But over the last year, I've added another bit to this, which is a company called Max Space, which is developing inflatable habitats, initially for LEO, but they have plans to expand beyond that. And the focus of their company, as you can infer from the name of the company, is to maximize the internal volume of their structure. And for that kind of objective, inflatables are the best way to go. So to give you an idea, they still have to fly like their prototype, I think, within the next year or so. But after that, they've got their first functional module, which fits inside of a Falcon 9. So they don't even require a bigger, this isn't even a Starship thing, a Falcon 9. And within one launch of a Falcon 9, they can have the same internal volume of the current ISS. To give you perspective, the ISS took multiple launches over 10 plus years to assemble. They can do it in one Falcon 9 launch, at least to get the same internal volume. So they do have plans for a bigger model that would fit inside of a Starship. And if they can ever get to doing that in one Starship launch, they'll have the same internal volume as a football stadium. And the reason those two go together is, if you think about it, I just said Starship launch, it takes 100 people, right? The maximum number of humans that humanity has ever launched in any one launch was always 7, because that's how many the space shuttle was capable of taking up. And Starship can take 100. So we modeled the ISS as a destination in space that, at most it can hold 9 people, 12 during an emergency. And some of the private space stations that are coming up are, I think, the biggest plan I saw was for 24 people, but that's based on Crew Dragon taking 7 people up max. But what happens when Starship comes online can take 100 people. It needs somewhere to take those 100 people. Not only that, SpaceX is working to have the ops tempo on that be a launch per week. Actually, they want to do it multiple times a day, but let's say in the next 5 years, they get to launch 1 per week, which means they're sending up 100 people per week. They have to have somewhere to go. And the ISS and some of these private space stations are not going to have the capacity for it. So something like Max Space would be an ideal solution. So anyway, those are the 2 things, Starship and Max Space.
Yeah, I will +1 the Starship. I was just doing, as I'm listening to, I was just doing some quick check on something. Yeah, so it's basically the equivalent. I always look at the equivalent of going from a Cessna or a Cirrus aircraft, which are single piston aircrafts, to a 737.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
it's huge,
slow, clunky. I mean, now we have basically Boeing is not doing well as they have stranded. But I think of the iterations of this, and you're right, that is exciting to me, because then it also lowers the cost of payload, the cost of people, and I know there's a factory like a Gigafactory. He's building a Starship factory. I mean, there's going to be fleets of these. So, as we kind of look to kind of close this podcast, which I think has been a great conversation, it's for our inaugural podcast for Off-World. I would love for you both. Let's talk about looking ahead. And this is where the bold prediction about the exploration of space. What do you think people should be prepared for? So I will, Ro, I'll start with you, and then I'll come back to Guillermo, and then I will move to my next question. These are kind of a little bit of rapid fire, so just kind of what comes to your mind.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, I think for humanity to be prepared for, I think the big thing is going to be human space exploration. I think definitely in the next few decades, we'll be seeing a lot more progress on that front. In particular with the Artemis missions, we're seeing that, missions to the moon, the first woman on the moon, the first person of color on the moon, great initiative. And I think that's literally just the beginning. So I'd say human space exploration is something that you should look out for and be excited for.
What's your bold prediction, Guillermo?
Well, I'll just take Rose maybe one step further. I think human space exploration will be more like Mars and Venus beyond Earth. I think what people need to be prepared for is just permanent presence off-world, where whether it's orbiting space stations or the moon, will be more permanent structures. You'll actually meet people who spend years in these places, rather than just going for a week or two.
If I will add, my bold prediction is we're going to have a propulsion breakthrough that's going to change the speed in which we just intersolar system,
definitely,
but possibly interstellar. So that's what I believe with the convergence.
And so when we develop that warp drive, we'll be contacted by the Vulcans.
I am not even going there. I'm thinking Epstein Drive. I'm thinking, I don't know about FTL, but hey, let's just speed it up and slow us down. Solar sailing, a Kirby Drive.
I will tell you what I do agree with on that. I think one thing people need to get ready for is just the common use of nuclear propulsion in space.
I agree.
For some reason, there's a stigma around that here on Earth, but in space, it's going to probably be one of the better ways to go.
My conspiracy theory on that is, having met Freeman Dyson and listening to him talk about the Orion project in the 60s, he felt strongly we would be like on Mars in the 70s. But for those of you who don't know, look it up. It's a wild project, but it was, and he always fought with Werner von Braun because he had a different way of he wanted to create a kind of space ring, a kind of a tour, and then have people, launch, which we're kind of doing now. But the Orion project was about dropping literally nuclear bombs through a throat and this exploding them to create propulsion and create speed. And there was a fear that they would all explode above the earth as it took off and kill everyone. And I also wonder if it was the oil and gas companies just, maybe lobbying Congress to kill it. Just a thought, not that kind of podcast, maybe not yet. But on the the other side of it, if we had to the interplanetary, multiplanetary species, if I think of Ray Bradbury's Mars books, like if we had to restart civilization, if you're taking some books, music, two things, what would you bring to start that civilization on I'll go with you, Ro. Yeah, you go first, Ro. Yeah.
I think it's okay. So 2 books. I'd say Carl Sagan Cosmos is a great one. That's always going to be a relevant book. I think it emphasizes the importance of science in our lives, and I think that'll be a good read to just have on deck if you're repopulating civilization. I'd also probably have a book that's more philosophical. So just a book on the great philosophers. There's a book by Stephen Law, I think, on that. And just having different mindsets, different perspectives on reality would be a healthy thing to have when you're in that situation. I think that'd be quite cool. So I'd take that book as well. In terms of music, I am a Michael Jackson fan, so I'd take You Rock My World from the Invincible album from Michael Jackson. That's a timeless classic. And I'd also take from the hip-hop world, I Know What You Want, Busta Rhymes, Mariah Carey. That is another timeless song. And to go with that in terms of equipment, probably a good speaker system is going to be essential, I'd say. So those are my takeaways.
Excellent. I appreciate. I like your specificity in this, Guillermo. You've probably been asked this question before, so you might have something on deck. So go ahead.
No, usually I answer this by I don't know, because whoever's going to go, they'll decide, not me. But if I had to pick book, I'd probably pick 2. Now I'm going to cheat because one's a trilogy. Is the Red Mars, Green Mars, Blue Mars trilogy, mostly because it just shows the development of the relationship between an off-world community and Earth over 400 years, over time. Likewise, maybe not a little bit more recent, Seven Eves by Neil Stephenson. For those of you who've read Neil Stephenson, he tends to write really long books. So this is like a 700-page book. It's basically 3 chapters. So it's like a trilogy in one. But again, it's, what happens to humanity when it's faced with an existential threat? How do they react to it? And how does that carry forward? How does humanity carry forward 500 years in the future? So I really liked that.
That's great. So kind of to wrap, how would you want this work to be remembered? How would you like to, it's about legacy, the impact you hope the Waypaver and Humans of Venus will have on the world. So Guillermo, you want to start, and we'll wrap with bro.
So wait, but I've got 2 of them then. I've got Waypaver and Humans to Venus.
No, I'll let you cover Waypaver, and I'll let Ro do Humans to Venus. Let's.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
I think the big thing. So I guess there's 2 with Waypaver. One is just the operational aspect of it as a nonprofit organization that has a kind of a self-sustaining model using the Space Venture Studio. That's not specific to Waypaver or to space. It's just an organizational innovation. But for Waypaver itself, I think the way we've kind of structured this by helping to make humanity a multi-planet species while also improving life here on Earth, I hope that if we push that narrative strongly enough, we will get to stop answering that question of why are we going to space. because it is by far the most popular question that anybody working in space gets from outside the space world. And hopefully we can kind of put that to rest, because there's plenty of opportunities on this planet to do both. We can go into space and we can preserve our planet.
Ro, what about you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think from the Human Civilians Foundation perspective, it's probably not as much focused on being remembered for the work that we're doing. I think it's more of a case of being or setting the foundations for a much greater purpose, and that's going to be expanding out into the cosmos, right? So the Human Civilians Foundation is literally just in place to, one, expand the public knowledge of Venus as its potential to be a destination for humanity, but also to lay down the steps necessary in place to get humans to Venus, and those people and the relevant parties who want to be a part of that can do that. So I think being a cog in that machine and that greater mechanism is what we're trying to do, and just trying to get things in motion. So seeing humanity expand out into the cosmos, to Mars, to the moon and beyond, to Venus, really is going to be the success of the Human Civilians Foundation in terms of down the line. I think it's going to be a case of just setting things in motion and getting those foundations there. So yeah, that'll be my answer.
So how do people... Go ahead, Guillermo. Yeah, please.
Just a quick thing to tack on to what Rose said. One of the things that we've talked about internally is it's entirely possible that we may be victims of our own success, right? If we are successful in our mission to get Venus out there in the general dialogue and people are excited about establishing a permanent presence in the Venusian atmosphere, and it happens, then there's no reason to have the Humans to Venus Foundation. In the future, we may find some ancillary mission, but if humanity does actually set up an off-world community in the Venusian atmosphere, there may be no reason for us to have the Humans to Venus Foundation.
I think you just replace. That's great. I think you should just replace the two with the ampersand, or the at symbol. So humans at Venus instead of humans to Venus.
There you go.
So, Ro, how do people find the foundation and check things out? And
yeah, for sure. I mean, so we have a website, humanstovenus.org. You can visit more information there. There's a lot more information on our community if you want to get involved. You can sign up to be part of our private community, to our e-newsletter as well for regular updates. And yeah, if you want to have access to our Venus Speaker Series recordings, then go to our page as well on our website, and you can sign up to the private community and gain access to our online members portal. So hopefully see a lot of you there.
That's great. And Guillermo, for White Paver, how would people find that?
Hey, just a quick thing on the Humans to Venus Foundation. I found that I have to remind people that it's the number 2, not the word 2.
Excellent point.
Although I think we do own both domains. And White Paver, it's easy, whitepaverfoundation.org.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you both for coming on the podcast today, and thanks for everybody for listening on our journey from Earth, Moon, Mars, Venus, and beyond. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to Going Off World. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms and at www.goingoffworld.com, as well as on YouTube under Going Off World. See you next time.